Before there was a United States, there was just a man. George Washington, a farmer, a general, a reluctant ruler, became the single most trusted figure in the birth of a nation. He didn't just win wars, he walked away from power. He didn't just lead, he defined what leadership meant. In this video, we explore 7 timeless leadership codes that made Washington the greatest leader in American history. Whether you're leading a country, a company, or your own family, these lessons are as powerful today as they were in 1776. George Washington didn't seek power. Power sought him. When he was called to lead the Continental Army in 1775, he didn't boast. Instead, he said he was unworthy of the task. Yet he accepted, not for glory, but because his country needed him, but he walked away from absolute power. Voluntarily. He didn't fight for a throne. He fought for a principle, that freedom should belong to the people, not to kings. After the war, he could have declared himself ruler. In fact, some even asked him to become king. Then, after serving 2 terms as president, he stepped down again, when many believed he should serve for life. Why? Because Washington believed that duty, not ambition, should guide a leader. He saw himself as a servant of the people, not a master of them. His humility laid the foundation of the American Republic. "I was summoned by my country, whose voice I can never hear, but with veneration and love," he once said. That's not the voice of a conqueror. That's the voice of a founder. In a world full of leaders who chase power, George Washington gave us something rare, a man who gave it away, because his country came first. Most leaders take power. George Washington gave it away, twice. After leading the Continental Army to victory, he could have seized control. The people adored him. The army trusted him. Even foreign leaders expected him to become America's first monarch. But instead, he went home, quietly, to Mount Vernon. If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world. That moment shocked the world. Even King George III reportedly said, and he did. Years later, after 2 terms as president, with no law requiring him to step down, he did it again, voluntarily. This act of restraint set the tone for every peaceful transition of power in American history. Washington believed that real leadership wasn't in holding on, it was in letting go. He knew that if liberty was to last, no one man could be above the nation. In his farewell address, he warned against the rise of lifelong rulers and unchecked ambition. He didn't just preach limits, he lived them. And that may be his most powerful legacy, because restraint is the highest form of strength. George Washington didn't lead from behind a desk. He led from the front, in the mud, the snow, and the chaos of war. When his soldiers were cold, he didn't watch from comfort. He stood with them. In the bitter winter of Valley Forge, Washington shared their hardship. No coat, no boots, no warmth, just shared sacrifice. That was leadership, not in words, but in action. Washington understood that you can't ask others to do what you are unwilling to do yourself. During battle, he rode into danger. During peace, he acted with humility. When power tempted him, he chose principle. When others turned to partisanship, he stood for unity. And when the presidency was his to hold indefinitely, he stepped aside. Every action Washington took set a precedent, not just for how a leader should behave, but how a nation should be built. His example became the unwritten law of American leadership. Live the values you demand from others. Honor your office. Protect the republic. To lead by command is easy. To lead by example, that takes character. In the 18th century, a man's honor was his identity. And for George Washington, it was sacred. He wasn't the smartest speaker. He didn't crave attention. But what he had was character. Washington believed that leadership wasn't measured in how loud you spoke, but in how consistently you lived your values. From a young age, he committed to a strict moral code. He copied out 110 rules of civility and decent behavior, not as homework, but as a roadmap to personal discipline. He was far from perfect. He made mistakes, but he took responsibility. Washington once said, "Labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire, called conscience." That spark guided him through impossible choices. When factions rose, he refused to take sides. When people praised him as a savior, he stayed humble. When power tempted him to stay in office, he stepped down. Washington understood something vital. Your legacy isn't built in a day. It's built in moments when no one is watching. Integrity isn't just about telling the truth. It's about being someone others trust, especially in silence. And that's what made Washington truly great. Not just what he did, but who he chose to be. When America was born, the Constitution wasn't just a legal document. It was a fragile promise. A promise that power would no longer belong to kings, but to the people. And George Washington was the first to test that promise. As the first president, he could have shaped the government around himself. Some even wanted him to become king. Others urged him to serve for life. But Washington chose something revolutionary. He submitted to the Constitution. He saw that real leadership wasn't about being the law. It was about protecting the law, even when it limited his power. When Congress pushed back, he respected the separation of powers. When political factions formed, he warned against them. believing unity was more important than party. Most powerfully, when his second term ended, he walked away, peacefully, quietly, with no demands. He trusted the Constitution enough to let it stand on its own. Washington showed that no one, not even a founding father, is above the rule of law. In doing so, he gave America something more powerful than a strong leader. He gave us a system where leaders serve, not reign. Loyalty to the Constitution isn't old-fashioned. It's the very reason freedom survives. And that legacy began with Washington. George Washington knew something that we often forget today. A divided people cannot build a united future. After leading America through war, he faced a different kind of battle, one far more dangerous: political division. Factions began forming, the Federalists on one side, the Democratic Republicans on the other. But Washington didn't join either. He warned the nation in his farewell address. The spirit of party agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms. Washington saw that when citizens begin to view each other as enemies, the republic weakens. For him, unity wasn't just about being polite. It was about survival. He believed the Constitution could only endure if Americans put the country above their own side. That disagreement was natural, but division was deadly. So, what did he do? He stayed neutral in party politics. He appointed cabinet members from opposing views. He placed national interest above personal loyalty. Washington didn't preach unity. He practiced it, even when it cost him political support. His leadership reminds us that democracy isn't built on everyone agreeing. It's built on people staying together even when they don't. In an age where division threatens progress, Washington's warning echoes louder than ever. The name of American must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. In other words, we are Americans first, not parties, not regions, not rivals. That's the legacy of unity Washington left us. It's on us to keep it alive. George Washington didn't just think about his time, he thought about yours. Every decision he made was guided by one question: what kind of country will this be when I'm gone? As the first president, he had no blueprint, only vision. He understood that true leadership means planting trees under whose shade you may never sit. Washington wasn't interested in quick wins or personal legacy. He was building a republic that would last centuries. That's why he set the two-term limit, even though it wasn't required. Strengthened civilian control over the military, even though he was a general. Rejected the idea of a monarchy, even though the people trusted him with total power. Why? Because he believed liberty must outlive the leader. In his farewell address, he warned Americans to preserve the Union, to cherish the Constitution, and to resist the temptation of permanent political power. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism. For Washington, being a patriot didn't mean fighting for your moment. It meant building for the future. Imagine what kind of leadership we'd have today if more people led with future generations in mind, not the next election cycle. That was Washington's gift to us. A government designed not for control, but for continuity. Not for one generation, but for all. This final code reminds us, you don't lead to be remembered. You lead to leave something worth remembering. George Washington could have been America's first king. Instead, he gave power back to the people and taught the world a new kind of leadership, one based on duty, on character, on restraint. His 7 leadership codes are more than history. They're a blueprint for every generation, from stepping down after 2 terms to warning us against political division. Washington didn't just lead by words. He led by example, and that's what made him the greatest leader in American history. What lessons from Washington do you think the world needs most today? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful lessons from the past to lead in the present. Thanks for watching, and remember, great leadership always begins with great character.